Hey guys, Leslie here and welcome back to another video where today I am doing another video where I list off a bunch of matchups for a specific category of people. Today I'm going to be going through every single member of the Akatsuki and everyone who was in the Akatsuki at some point and giving them a matchup and explaining the connections behind it, and that's really all there is to it. If you're going to enjoy this video, then make sure to like and subscribe, and firstly, let's start with ZETSU versus Flowey from Undertale. They're the two overarching villains who watched over all of the events of their own stories from the background. Both are followers of a much more imposing, godly villain, and is set to complete a plan that was made by them originally. They'd end up killing who would be built up to be the main antagonist, originally at least, to then have a much harder fight afterwards. And generally I think it quite vibes as well, although it is a kind of a stomp. Next is Hidan versus Alexander Anderson from Hellsing. They are two religious anime psychopaths who will do anything for the god that they worship. They're also both parts of groups that are specifically catered to hunting down supernatural beings and are very hard to kill. Sadly, this is also a stomp, but what else can you really do? Next is Sasori versus Kuromi from A Kill Ga Kill. They both grew up without parental love, relying on their only remaining living relatives being Chiyo and Akame. Eventually they both were separated from their relatives and ultimately joined a powerful group, being the Akatsuki and the Jaegers. Doing so ultimately brought them into battle against their relative, who eventually attempted to kill them. Both specialise in the use of human puppets, with them specifically using puppets modelled after significant people and creatures. It's a story with his puppets of his parents, as well as the third Kazekage, and Kuromi having puppets of her allies and danger beasts. This battle is also one of polar opposites, with Sasori working for the Akatsuki, which is a criminal group, while Kuromi works for the Jaegers, a squad that directly works under the Empire, which directly opposes criminal activity. And I think it generally vibes. I don't know much about Akame ga Kill, so I don't know who wins, but it is generally quite good. Next is Deidara versus Oyokomova. Definitely butchered that, from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. There are two psychotic terrorists who act as minor antagonists who are extremely talented at making bombs and wield supernatural explosions as their main weapons, being Deidara's clay and Boku no Rhythm. They also both think highly of their work. Deidara referred to his explosives as art, and that name, saying that God's will support his actions, who almost both killed the story's deuterogonists with a notable lineage, being Sasuke and Gyro, but would end up being dead themselves. Next is by far the one with the least amount of connections in this video, but I think it's still okay. It's Conan versus Kabuto Zoldyck from Hunter x Hunter. They are two purple-haired anime girls who are part of an evil organisation. Despite being some of the weakest within their group, they're still formidable foes and manipulate paper in order to fight, and it generally quite vibes again, even if it is really one-sided. Next is KAKUZU versus SANDMAN from the Spectacular Spider-Man series. Unironically, this is actually quite good. They are villains of strange, shape-shifting biologies and have an unsustainable lust for wealth. Before getting their powers, they operated under a service of a shady yet powerful figure, being the big man and Taki leader, but both were humiliated in their defeats by the hands of a heroic figure in red, being Spider-Man and Hashirama. Wishing to possess great power, they altered their physiology to become one that's exceptionally hard to kill, bestowed upon them with the ability to expand their bodies, being Earth Grudge Fear and Sandman's Sand Biology. They typically operate with a notable partner, being Hidan and Rhino, and are associated with an elite group of rogues within their setting, being the Sinister Six and the Akatsuki. They are associated with the element of the earth, with Sandman being related to sand and KAKUZU's having his earth release, and are tasked with eliminating a hero noted with an animal motif, being Spider-Man and Naruto with the Jinchuriki of the Nine-Tailed Fox. However, they don't really care about the specifics of their job and are more focused on taking as much money as possible. I didn't have a good KAKUZU matchup before I found out about this, and I find that quite funny, to be honest. Next is KISAME versus JETSTREAM Sam from Metal Gear. Now, this is definitely the longest one, so bear with me. Early on in their lives, they were introduced to a tradition of swordsmanship, Sam being born into a bloodline of swordsmen, and Kisame being one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist. It is during this time that they were inherited a prized blade within their respective line of swordsmen, the Samehada and the Murasama. I definitely butchered those, but we move on. They also both have special properties, which allow them to shred through their opponents on a razor-thin level. These swords also have a form of identification measures that means that others are not really able to wield it, being Musurama's ID lock and Samehada's pickily, choosing his wielder. Both fighting styles both have roots in real-world Japanese swordsmanship. One can consider like Sam being a samurai, while Kisame's a ninja. Both are experienced in a troubling event within their youth related to their swordsman superiors, with Kisame uncovering Fugaki's treachery to the mist, and Sam's father being killed by one of his pupils. This led to them both making a prominent kill, Kisame killing Fugaki and Sam killing his father's pupil. This kill specifically was a very important aspect to both of their ideologies they'd both go on to follow, with Kisame killing a comrade being the basis of his entire worldview, and Sam's desire for revenge birthing his initial sense of justice. They later left their home countries and became notorious rogue mercenaries, to the point where they even attempted assassinations of elite political figures, Kisame killing Daimano, and Sam attempted to kill Senator Armstrong, as well as aiding with the assassination of the African president. Both have become deeply disillusioned with their worlds as a result of the clash, with a predominant asset to their country being Kisame killing Fugaki and Armstrong defeating Sam. They would both replace their previous morals with one centered around erosion of justice, Kisame believing that the shinobi system was one of a big lie, and Sam losing his sense of justice. Their loss of personal identity as well, with Sam eventually forgetting what drove him with his lust for battle in the first place, and Kisame, he believing he didn't know his true place in the world or who he really is, and with the necessity of murder. Kisame believing that he must kill his comrades to preserve information, and Sam believing that ideals have no place in a battlefield as morality can only be determined by the victors. They were both confronted by a powerful political figure with a desire to radically change the world, Senator Armstrong and Obito Uchiha, who preyed upon their existing ideology in an attempt to draw loyalty towards their plan. Armstrong using his absolute defeat of Sam and to render Sam's sense of justice mute, and Obito enticing Kisame with a world of truth. They both joined the figure's militarized mercenary group, the Desperado and the Akatsuki, with their plans to reshape the world through a planned operation. Operation TEXUME, I've pictured that as well, and the Eye of the Moon. That will both also jumpstart a war, Armstrong's war economy and the Fourth Shinobi War. During their time in this organisation, they both clashed against and became infatuated with a powerful, brooding ninja swordsman tied to the government, who previously was served as a child soldier within the elite Black Ops unit, being Raiden and Itachi. Part of this fascination comes from the ways in how they see themselves in this reflected person, Kisame seeing Itachi as another ninja who carries the burden of murdering his allies, and Sam seeing another fellow swordsman, and Raiden's justice as an echo of the morals that he once had. They also both frequently operate with a partner, Sundowner and again Itachi. In general, they both have a strange, friendly rapport with their mercenary allies, Sam being well acquainted and joking with Sundowner and conversing with Monsoon, and Kisame being friendly with Itachi and appreciating Tobi's humour. As a result, both's disillusioned ideals, they ended up vesting their desires in the world of the organisation which they sought to fight out. Kisame believing in the Eye of the Moon, believing it would restore an objective truth to the world, while Sam relished in the thought of combat that Armstrong's economy of war will bring. Both's deaths caused the duel with a noble rival, being Might Guy and Raiden. They both which admit that their ideology is flawed, Sam admitting that Raiden had him rethinking his whole plan, and Kisame finally agreeing with Itachi that maybe he's not a hollow person that he once thought he would be. Their killer blades would eventually end up in the hands of another swordsman, Killer B and Raiden. Bizarrely, in the events in which where the blades are switched hands, heavily relied upon the presence of a character's animal partner, being Sam entrusting Musurama to Blade Wolf, and Samehada taking a liking to Gyuka's chakra aura. Both have fought against legendary beasts within their setting, the Metal Gear Ray and Roshi of the Four Tails. Both adore a thrill for battle and have a penchant for slicing and dicing their opponents. Despite their flashy fighting styles, they are also both deceivingly perceptive and are capable of identifying the foundations of an enemy's technique. Both are very prominent and have a morbid sense of humour, from their playful, mocking banter to their iconic smirks that kind of sometimes spot in battle. They both seem to have a liking towards humorous nicknames, Sam calling Raiden Blondie and Kisame dubbing KAKUZU and Hidan the Zombie Brothers. Both are assigned vaporous aquatic nicknames that were referenced in their home country, Miyano and the Monster of the Hidden Mist. Honestly, if I'd found out about this matchup before making my top 20 favourite matchups, this might have at least made, the notable mentions. This is actually really good. I don't know who wins because I don't know Metal Gear scaling, although I think it might be Kisame. I could be completely wrong though. Next is Kabuto versus Tomura Shigaraki from My Hero Academia. They were orphans with a messed up childhood, whose parents, or rather family members, were killed, or by an adoptive family member in Kabuto's case, before being taken in by manipulative psychopaths, being Orochimaru and All For One, who brainwashed them into being their tools and remember very little of their past. These manipulative villains would also create a group of similarly brainwashed kids, the Sound 4 and the League of Villains, and would entrust their students to act as semi-leaders and the right-hand man to their masters. Eventually, these groups would take in a rogue brother, being Sasuke and Toya, coming in from a prominent family, being the Uchiha and the Todoroki, with a proficiency in fire, being Fire Release and Blue Flame, who agreed to join the group in order to take revenge upon the family members, being Itachi Uchiha and Enji Todoroki. The villains who took them in would later have an old battle with an old enemy of theirs, being Hiruzen, the third Hokage, and All Might, who they both share a long history with Hiruzen being Orochimaru's sensei and the original wielder of All For One, or One For All, being All For One's brother. A fight which would leave them in an extremely delicate, fragile conditions. Hiruzen stealing part of Orochimaru's soul within his arms, and All Might critically injuring All For One. Later on, these masterminds would be defeated again and locked away, or Orochimaru being sealed away by Itachi Susanoo, and All For One being incarcerated, but not before their powers were given to their apprentices, with Shigaraki gaining All For One, and Kabuto injecting himself with Orochimaru's remains, which fused into their very bodies and gave them new appearances consisting of a pale skin, grey hair, and made them incredibly hard to kill, mostly due to their hyperspeed regeneration. After gaining their powers, they started to gain an inferiority complex and recognised themselves as above their predecessors in every way, and only wanted to get more power as a result. They would see themselves mirrored upon an enemy, being Naruto and Deku. For most of their lives, most of their allies, one of their allies being Obito and Oboro, who was originally a friend of one of the heroes, being Kakashi and Aizawa, who studied with them and gave their friends special eye-related gifts. Obito gave Kakashi a Sharingan, and Orobo gave Aizawa his goggles, before supposedly quote-unquote dying on failed missions due to fallen debris. They would eventually return as mysteriously masked, being Tobi and Kurogiri, with the ability to teleport as their main gimmick, being Kamui and Warp Gate, after being found and influenced by a villain mastermind who was behind the scenes, being Madara and All For One. During a conflict, these teleporting villains would re-encounter their childhood friend, who was now a teacher of the future heroes, being Team 7 in Class 1A, who used their eye-related powers in battle. They both eventually take over their idealistic group, being the Akatsuki and the Paranormal Liberation Front, and use them for war, being the Fourth Shinobi War and the Paranormal Liberation War. Due to their ideologies and disdain for the world system, Kabuto felt betrayed by the Shinobi world by forcing him to give up so much that he felt dear to him, and Shigaraki hates the current hero society. However, these wars also served a goal in capturing and stealing the power of the main character, which was sealed within them, being the Ninetales and All For One, or One For All rather, and use it to gain higher power. Their main numbers of this war came in the front of living experiments, being the Nomus and White ZETSU clones, thought to be created by one of the main villains, being Madara and All For One. Most of this matchup's connections come from the fact that they're related to other people with connections, but I do quite like this, even if I do also like Shigaraki versus Pain. Next is Orochimaru versus Voldemort from Harry Potter. There are two male main villains who grew up in the same place as the main cast before the main characters were born. Due to their goals of wanting immortality, they would leave said place and go on their way to try and gain immortality through splitting themselves into other things. They would both have connections with snakes, using them in attacks, and both have dark armies so great they could even take down the place of where they were raised, being the main cause of the death of their old mentor. They also both have children through unexplained ways and spin-offs. I initially thought that Orochimaru completely washed the floor, and while I do think he does win, it's actually a bit closer than I initially thought. Next is Itachi Uchiha versus Madoka from Infinite Stratos. They're both red-eyed, black-haired themed older siblings, with younger brothers being Sasuke Uchiha and Ichikada Omura. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right either. Both have known to antagonize others and always shown their superiority. Both have also been forced into antagonistic role after events in the series, Itachi being forced into killing the Uchiha clan, and Madoka joined the Phantom Task, seeking revenge after she was left by her siblings. Both of the members of a villainous team, being the Akatsuki and the Phantom Task, both are also capable of resisting a mental attack as well. There's not that many good matchups for Itachi, which is a bit surprising, but this one's alright, I think. Next, for the leader of the Akatsuki, Pain. There were two matchups I considered here, one that vibes more and one that has more connections, kind of like with the TOMURA situation in the last video. One that vibes more is Pain versus Penance from Marvel Comics. They were originally bright-eyed heroes who wanted to bring peace, but after one of their teammates died, they adopted a new alias who decided that peace was necessary, or rather, get peace by any means necessary, involving Pain. And this executes the best, thing about Pain's character, which is why I figured I'd conclude it here, because while Pain's other matchup I have here has more connections, it doesn't quite have that Pain fallen hero kind of thing. So the other matchup I have for Pain is Pain versus Father from FULLMETAL Alchemist. Their primary shonen antagonist, who led a fearsome group, has split part of themselves into separated but an obedient unit. Both started off as more human and emotional characters, but became stoic and composed upon purging themselves of specific emotions. Specifically, their relationships to these emotions, being pain for Pain and the 7 sins for Father, and how these emotions shackle them as a core for their characters. Pain believes that he is the one meant to bear pain of others, whereas Father fears and envies emotional connection between humans and attempts to purge them from himself as a result. Both, most importantly, have divine aspirations, which would lead to them becoming godlike rulers. Pain, figuratively by proxy, using and mutually assured destruction, whereas Father is more liberal, and are considered godlike among their respective castes. Both of their master plans involved the rounding up of key characters to obtain their goals. Both are also considered threats from the past who had alternative identities, being Nagato, a dwarf in the flask. And both were influenced by a wise, but at the time young teacher, being Jiraiya and Honheim. Butchered that as well, but here we go. They also both take the appearance of those who were once closest to them, with their biological exterior being a screen of their true form. I don't know who wins, because I don't know FULLMETAL Alchemist scaling either, but it's good, in my opinion. And finally, Obito Uchiha. Yeah, if you've been around in the channel for longer than a day, you already know which matchup I'm going to say. It's Obito versus Darth Vader. They were once great heroes who fought for good, only for them to be betrayed by their best friends, which made them turn evil and followed new masters. Both of them turned into a hero again before their death when they encountered the young heroes who supposedly were able to bring peace to the world. They also both use masks to hide their identity and are the cause of wars. Generally, I think the matchup works quite well, and that is the end of the video. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.